You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, our city, our network. This is the Trojans Huddle, your USC Trojans segment of the show. Excited to get into it. Joined as always by the madman, my good friend Jamal Madney, birthday boy in the house. What's up, brother? How we doing?
Good, doing well, Ryan. Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be doing this with you, and it's going to be a fun weekend of great Trojans football, and also coincides with my birthday party that you and the missus will attend that we're so excited about. So really excited about this weekend, both on the field as well as off.
Yes, happy belated birthday. I won't make you divulge the number, but another year wiser, another year grown in the, in gaining knowledge and all that good stuff.
I don't know about gaining knowledge, but gaining in the waistline, gaining in all the wrong places and losing in all the right places.
That's fair. That's where I am too. So, but happy birthday, man. Pumped to be with you right now and then hanging with you obviously this weekend for the game and for your birthday. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one this weekend out in the desert. Before we get into it, show as always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV. You're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. If you bet on this game, do you know, Jamal, the spread for this one? I don't have it in front of me.
I believe it's been fluctuating, but USC kind of has been alternating between -15 and -15.5.
That's right, because them and UCLA are both favored by right around 15. I remember seeing that. So but you can head to BetOnline. You can find the true spreads right there, but I think it's around 15 to bet on your Trojans. Use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for a 50% welcome bonus. All right, Jamal. So our 6-1 Trojans coming off the bye after a tough loss to Utah. We talked extensively about that game. Utah eked out a win last night, actually, against Washington State. Could have very well lost that game with some coaching decisions on the Washington State side. But Utah moves forward again in the rankings a little bit. USC obviously was on a bye. Now they travel out to Tucson to face the 3-4 Wildcats. Initial thought on this Jedd Fisch Arizona team, who I think both of us thought this team had a lot of potential. Obviously, they were terrible last year, so the expectations weren't very high, but Jedd Fisch brought in a lot of recruits, a lot of transfers, a lot of new recruits early on. So this, I think, is a team and a program that's going to definitely be building in the right direction, but they're just not there yet, but still poses a threat to our Trojans. Your thoughts going into this game?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm really impressed with Jedd Fisch's coaching job with Arizona this year. You have to remember, this was a team that won one game last year, was arguably the worst team in Division I football. Jedd Fisch, from year one to year two, gets into the transfer portal, gets into the recruiting game, and really reels in some tremendously big fish against some of the elite Pac-12 schools in terms of recruiting battles, and has done so at the skill positions. And they've gone from a one-win team to now with an opportunity with a historic upset could get to 500. So Jedd Fisch was someone who really impressed us, I remember, at Pac-12 Media Day in terms of his vision, his focus, his charisma, his confidence about doing this job, and it's translating over onto the field. And I think the strength of this team, Ryan, really lies in that passing attack. I think if you look at wide receiving rooms across the Pac-12, obviously, USC has to be number one with Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, Brenden Rice, Tahj Washington, and the rest of that army. I think there's an argument to be made that the Washington Huskies are number two with their trio of wide receivers that Michael Penix Jr. has been able to litter the ball around to. And then you could credibly say that the third best receiving core in the Pac-12 is Arizona, with this three-headed monster of Jacob Cowing, Dorian Singer, and McMillan. And they may even give Washington a run for their money for being the second best group. And then when you factor in Jayden de Laura, the transfer from Washington State, who put up some big numbers last year in the Pac-12, now comes over through 7 games, actually has 300 yards more passing than Caleb Williams does. same number of touchdowns as Caleb Williams does at 19, but has been more interception prone. Caleb, with only that one interception, been spectacular in terms of protecting the ball. de Laura is at 7 interceptions. But when you look at kind of top end receiving aerial attack, this Arizona team is just as good as any in the Pac-12 and arguably the best passing attack that USC will play to this point. So I think there's a lot to dive into, a lot to get excited about in this game. And I think that 15.5-point spread could potentially be a bit misleading.
Yeah, well, coming into the season, we did our preseason predictions. And I don't believe this now because of the way the season has gone. But at the time, I had predicted the USC's one loss of the season was going to be to Arizona. I thought they would win in Salt Lake City. And after all that emotion of that win, kind of have a letdown game against Arizona. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case after losing a heartbreaker to Utah and having the bye. But anyway, we'll get into predictions and stuff later. But everything you said, though, definitely makes this game, and I don't even want to call it a trap game. I know that they're a 3 of 14. They were the doormat of the Pac-12 last year. But I think everyone knows Arizona is a budding program that is growing, that is going to be one of those, whether it's the Pac-12 or whatever ends up happening with the conference, it's going to be one of those schools and programs that is on the up and up, especially with a guy like Jedd Fisch. And where everything you just said worries me, not to the extent where I think they're going to lose, but worries me in the sense of this game is going to be probably close for at least an extent of it, is the offense and what we've seen on the defensive side. And I feel like a broken record. We talk every week about this defense and if they can slow offenses down. Well, now they face another good offense, another good receivers, like you mentioned. We thought at the beginning of the year it was going to be the rush defense that was going to be the issue. Well, the last few weeks, it's been the pass defense that's been the issue. I mean, we talked about how much they gave up to Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, record-breaking numbers they gave up to him. They actually contained the running game decently somewhat. So when you look at all that, definitely that is the matchup to watch, is how this USC secondary can contain de Laura and those triage of receivers you mentioned, because that's what it's going to come down to. We say it every week. I'm going to say it again. It comes down to 4 stops or a couple turnovers. Now, you just mentioned that their quarterback has turned the ball over 7 times through the air. So that definitely proves likely and in the favor of the USC Trojan defense, but we got to see on the field. But I feel good about this game, but definitely that's the matchup, Jamal, we have to look for, is the passing attack versus this passing defense that struggled so mightily 2 weeks ago.
No question, Ryan. It's you hit the nail on the head, and it's strength on weakness, as you've described. And then we need to see what the state of health is with USC on the defensive side. Obviously, at the end of that Utah game, a lot of guys banged up. Obviously, the front liner there was Jordan Addison with that very awkward fall down the right sideline and with the ankle. But then, of course, Gentry, and his injury was so significant at the end of that game, that emotional plea that he had running out of the medical tent, literally hopscotching his way from the medical tent about 35 yards into that USC huddle against Utah, firing up his team, and then hopscotching all the way back. Lincoln Riley has been very mysterious, a little cagey over the last few days in practice about the state of health of some of these guys, calling the vast majority of them day to day. But Gentry was banged up. Shane Lee was banged up even before the Utah game. Corey Foreman, there's been reports he's banged up a little bit. And so even at full strength, the lack of depth of this defense has been a concern, and their overall level of play has been a concern. Now, when you factor in, hey, where is the state of these key players in terms of health, that can add a layer of complexity and challenge. And then it's the road game element. This is the last road game, essentially, for USC outside of the game against UCLA at the Rose Bowl, which is also played in Los Angeles, obviously. And if you look at the last 2 road performances, squeaked one by against Oregon State, came down to that last drive, that 4th and 6 push, Caleb finding Addison for that 23-yarder down the right sideline to preserve that game and get that interception, winning 17-14. And then the heartbreaker against Utah, the 43-42 loss with the 2-point conversion. So both of those games have been dogfights. How does this USC team respond on the road? Their last road game, they're coming off their bye. So the fact that it's on the road, it's strength versus weakness, and they're managing some injuries, it's definitely going to be a competitive game, in my opinion, for at least 2.5 quarters, because Arizona is going to be able to score. They're going to feel empowered and confident at home, and they're going to sort of leverage their momentum to try and hang with this powerful USC team.
Yeah, and want to mention that Arizona also coming off the bye after just losing to Washington back on the 15th. So they also have the full bye week to get ready and prepare for this game. You know, Coach Riley said on Wednesday, referring to Addison and Gentry, that they are true game time decisions, which is never what you want to hear, because that usually means they're trending wrong, but things can change. Or he's just, like you said, keeping everything very close to the vest, and they might be almost 100% healthy, and he's just saying that. But that is definitely will have a huge factor on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Gentry being so great on the defensive side, and Addison, we all know how great Addison is. And I know they have a bevy of weapons on offense, but not all of them can exactly do what Jordan Addison brings to the game. So very important about how those guys trend health-wise. And it'll be interesting to see how they adapt if they're unable to go and who steps up, because we've talked about before, Jamal, offensively, I think they'll be okay. Defensively, the depth there gets pretty short listed when you look at the depth behind the starters. And so you lose another starter. You know, they already lost linebacker earlier in the year. Now they could potentially lose another one for this one. And Shane Lee is banged up also. Now you're looking at not guys you probably want to be starting in Power 5 football necessarily yet. So those will definitely be storylines. We'll keep everyone posted here at the LA Football Network. But one thing I want to ask you, Jamal, you and Mikey Mack, our video producer, did a great video really breaking down the film of Travis Dye. Travis Dye, who has had a fantastic season. USC fans obviously have come to love the guy. They know how good he is. But the thing you guys really dove into is his pass blocking ability. Now, Travis Dye is not a big human being by any means. He's not a Zach Charbonnet in the backfield from UCLA. He's not even an Austin Jones. He's a much smaller frame. I think he looks even smaller because he doesn't wear gloves for whatever reason. That just makes someone look smaller. But he's great in pass pro. Talk a little bit about that and how much that means in this game against an Arizona defense that, you know, isn't necessarily a power defense. They gave up 44 points to Washington last week, but they can get after the quarterback like most defenses can in this league.
You know what's so special about Travis Dye, Ryan, is his versatility right at the line of scrimmage. And I think that variation is what Lincoln Riley has played to perfection to this point. When you look at Travis Dye, and when you watch him catch balls out of the backfield, for instance, rarely do you see him run horizontally in the flats. Like, he'll catch maybe 30% of his balls in that fashion, but about 70% of the time, he'll actually run in between through the offensive line and then make a cut in the middle of the field and be that security blanket. And Lincoln Riley has used that play to perfection when it comes to Dye's pass blocking ability as well, because he has an ability to hold the linebackers, where if the linebackers are bringing pressure and he's running through that line, they have to pause and say, well, is he coming out or can I go in? And that's a very interesting decision right at that line of scrimmage. And oftentimes that split second of hesitation gives Travis Dye an additional time and space and perspective to survey the field and even sort of go from tackle to tackle from one side to the other to pick up a block. And so it's really his pass catching ability, straight line through that line, that enables him to offset some of the physical challenges that he may have when you think about a traditional pass blocker. And he's done that so effectively, not just picking up blitzes on the strong side of where he is and where he's expecting, but sort of flying over to Caleb's weak side and picking up a block. And his technique is so good, where he doesn't go too high, he doesn't go too low. He uses his body so well as a shield and really hits that defender in the midsection with his own body. And those are the plays that allows Caleb to buy that time and really bring his improvisational artistry to the forefront. And that's where plays start breaking down on defense. Caleb can sort of run around, maneuver, extend plays, find gaps in zone coverages, go deep, and really let the bevy of offensive weapons of USC come to life. And so Travis Dye's pass blocking ability is not nearly talked about enough, but I would argue one of the three most potent weapons that Lincoln Riley has at his disposal to make this offense very potent. And I have to sort of mention not just Travis Dye, but the other exceptional pass blocker on USC's team that doesn't get a lot of publicity is Tahj Washington. And so when people ask, why is Washington on the field so much, or why does he sort of occasionally catch a ball or two when it's clear that Addison and Williams are receivers 1A and 1B, it's because of Washington's ability to sort of chip on bubble screens, to block down the field, create convoys, create alleys for these long pass plays, and really sort of help open up space. So between Dye and Washington's pass blocking ability, things are there when a play isn't even designed for that space, but you're banking on these guys being exceptional in terms of putting a hat on a hat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so fun to watch these guys develop and how important they are. And the other thing, Jamal, that I've really enjoyed watching through now 7 games and going into the 8th game is you see that obviously Lincoln Riley was able to get these high profile guys and recruits, but you can see now some reasoning behind it and how they all fit into the cog of his, and I'm talking specifically offense, but how they fit into exactly what he needs to make that machine work. And you mentioned everything that Travis Dye does in the backfield that allows Caleb Williams to be so improvisationable and be able to slide to his left, slide to his right. And you see how Austin Jones even fits as more of the hammer running back when need be. How I know Tahj Washington was here before Lincoln Riley got here, but how he now fits a little differently in this offense than he did in past offenses. So it's been really fun to watch how, yes, it's a no-brainer, the guys he was bringing in from the transfer portal. Like, yeah, duh, these are all like 5 4-star guys that have had success elsewhere. But there was also a reason behind it because of how they fit within the offense and how they kind of keep things going and make this thing so potent. And with that being said, you look at Arizona, Jamal, their last 3 games, they played Oregon, they played Washington, and they played California. They gave up 43 plus points in all 3 of those games, 49 and 49 each to Oregon and Cal. So this is definitely not a game where USC's offense should be slowed down in the slightest. Yes, they had an extra week to prepare on the bye, but so did SC, had an extra week to prepare on the bye. So I'd assume this is going to be a 45 plus point performance from the offense. Defense, we just talked about earlier. We don't need to get back into it. Really just need a couple stops here and there, just to kind of keep it under 35, which I think can definitely happen. But how do you see this offense performing? Do you think we see a 50 plus performance? Do you think that 45 range is probably the sweet spot that makes a lot of sense?
No, Ryan. I mean, I think that they're going to be able to move the ball at will against this defense that is undersized in some key positions. And that's going to be Jedd Fisch's next step, the next phase of his rebuilding process. Phase 1 was, can I get guys to even come to Arizona that wouldn't otherwise consider us at the skill position? That next phase is, how do I get guys in the trenches? How do I get physical defenders that are playing the appropriate position given their size to come to Arizona? And so for those reasons right now, they're just not ready to play. But one thing I will say, Ryan, and you brought up a great point, this team is 3-4, but they're battle tested. They've played Oregon. They've played Washington. They played an SEC opponent in Mississippi State in the non-conference. So they're not going to be intimidated by USC. This is not going to be a team that is going to line up saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? They may line up and not believe that they can win the game, but they're going to line up with every intention of playing high motor football against USC because they've seen all of these things before. And I think the key for SC is going to be not to try and do too much early in this game. You can't make up for the loss. Oftentimes what happens is when you lose going into that bye and you have 2 weeks to simmer over a loss that maybe you feel like you shouldn't have had, you come into that next game really trying to have a 38-point play in the first quarter, or try to score 3 touchdowns on one play, and you just can't do that. So the only kind of thing that SC needs to watch for is not trying to do too much too early. Trust the scheme, trust the offense, trust your advantages, both at the outside as well as in the backfield, and methodically move the ball down the field. And with Caleb Williams' exceptional leadership, I see no reason why that's not going to be the case. But this is going to be a game where SC is going to be in the mid-40s to potentially the mid-50s if there's a couple of turnovers and a bevy of them on Arizona and SC can stack some quick plays together. So high octane offense, no question about it in this one. And, what else is there as a surprise? It's going to be very much where that Utah game left off.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap the show up, got to mention our friends at Liquid Death. If you've been seeing those tall cans of beer or energy drink looking cans in the water section, you're actually incorrect. That's Mountain Alpine spring water from the Alps. It's delicious. It's great. We love it over here at the LA Football Network. You can find it at any of your convenience retailers, Vons, Safeway, Ralph's, 7-Eleven, or you can go to liquiddeath.com/LAFB to find the nearest retailer near you. It's called Liquid Death because it'll murder your thirst, but they're also trying to kill plastic bottle pollution. They're doing that by donating for every can purchased. So that's liquiddeath.com/LAFB. You won't regret it. Tell me guys at the LA Football Network sent you. All right, Jamal, let's get into some prediction times. 4:00 kickoff down at the Zona Zoo in Tucson. I don't know if you've been to Tucson. It's, I won't say anything bad about the city, but it's a great college campus. I'll say that. It's a great college student section. The Zona Zoo is one of the rowdiest, most raucous student sections in the country. I don't know how how into the game they'll be at this point, just after 2 losing seasons, but you can never count out when SC comes to town. So I'm sure it'll be a good sized crowd there for this one. How do you see this playing out? We kind of laid it all out, but just quickly, who's your winner? How do you see it playing out, and what concerns you at all?
Ryan, what's interesting, just to provide a little bit of historical context, this week, and in fact, yesterday, 10 years ago, a 6-1 top 10 USC team back in 2012 came to Arizona and walked away with a 39-36 loss in that game. That was the year of Matt Barkley and Marquise Lee and Robert Woods, and the year of unfinished business, if you recall. And USC was preseason number 1. They had a slip up against Stanford early in the season, came to this game 6-1. Marquise Lee went crazy in that game. I remember he had over 250 yards receiving, had over 350 all-purpose yards. If it wasn't for the, 5-13 game of Reggie Bush against Fresno State, that performance by Marquise Lee would be talked about way more in Trojan history. It really springboarded his national campaign for the Biletnikoff that year and ultimately that victory. But it also began a stretch where SC ended up losing 5 of their last 6 games and went from preseason number 1 to 7-6 and a loser in the Sun Bowl that year. So not to say any of that is going to happen this year, and far from it.
Take it easy, Jamal. Take it easy.
But this is a dangerous place for SC. Again, 6-1, again, top 10 to play. So even though this is a 3-4 team, a lot of fans will be there. There's a great rivalry between SC and Arizona in terms of families. A lot of SC alums live out in Arizona now. And so I expect a very raucous crowd against a very battle-tested team. My concern going into this game, Ryan, we talked about the defensive matchup with this offense and how are they going to be able to handle 3 really great wide receivers on the outside. Dalton Kincaid as one guy and Devon Vele as one receiver really torched this whole team. So I'm really excited to see what Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley have cooked up from a schematic perspective to at least limit Arizona in terms of, the plays, the yards per play, and creating enough friction, play over play and drive over drive. But points are going to be coming fast and furious. I am a little bit concerned as well about the Addison injury, and on the road, if Addison doesn't go, sliding Mario Williams as wide receiver 1, sliding all these guys up a slot. Caleb is Caleb. He's phenomenal. But that sort of chemistry that he has with Addison, he doesn't quite have it yet with Mario and the others. And so will that sort of appear? I'm a little bit concerned about this game, Ryan. I don't believe SC is going to cover. I think that the 15.5 is a little aggressive given the circumstances. But this team is too talented. Lincoln Riley is too great a coach off of a bye. And Caleb Williams is too special to let anything catastrophic happen in this game. Having said that, I think it's going to be much more exciting than people give credit for. I think it's going to be much more competitive for a much longer period than people give credit for. Ultimately, I see USC prevailing 44-38 They'll win by 6, but they won't cover. Move to 7-1 and get ready for those final 2 tune-ups, and then that big one against UCLA for a Pac-12 title berth on the line.
The other fun thing about this rivalry, and you mentioned everything correctly, but on the other side, a lot of LA kids go to school in Arizona. And I know a lot of LA kids go to Arizona State, but U of A, a lot of kids are down there in Zona Zoo and Tucson. And, I've spent spring break down there back when I went to Long Beach State with buddies that went down there. So it's definitely a family rivalry, if you will, just because a lot of like the intertwining of the two states and 2 cities and the proximity that they have, which makes a lot of fun. So I'm going to preface this in 2 different ways in my prediction, Jabal. So first of all, I think Caleb Williams is going to have his best performance of the season, which is hard to do considering how great some of his performances have already been. I mean, what did he have? 450 last time against Utah. But I think that you could tell he was so irked by the way they lost that game and how they could have had an opportunity to win multiple times and couldn't put it away. And I just think he comes out guns blazing and he's going to have his best statistical performance of the season. Regardless, I think that's the case. Now, score-wise, I think a lot depends on if Jordan Addison plays. If Jordan Addison plays, call me a homer, call me whatever you want, but I think they top the 49-point performance that both Oregon and Cal had, and they put up 51. They hold. It's going to be close early. They get a late turnover that's either a turnover for a touchdown or a turnover in their possession where they can turn it over quickly, and I think they hold Arizona to 30. So I'm going to say 51-30. If Addison plays, they cover by a lot. They get 21 over him. If Addison does not play, I still think they win. I still think Caleb Williams has a phenomenal game, but it's going to be a much, much closer game, and I'll go 38-30 in that sense. I just think Addison adds that much volatility to the offense. Even if he's not the one scoring the touchdowns, he adds that other element that they need that is almost a 13-point swing, which I just predicted in that. So 38-30 if Addison doesn't play. They don't cover. 51-30 if he does play, and they cover by a long shot. Caleb Williams puts up Heisman-type numbers and gets back in the top run, which he might be still anyway. But anyway, that's what I think.
I love that. Oh, man. The Biletnikoff winner is worth 13 points in this game. I love that, and hard to argue. And that's a bold statement, Ryan, to say that Caleb's going to have an even better game than he did against Utah. I don't know how you top that Utah game in terms of the throws that he made, the plays that he made. That was just such a special performance. And if he meets it, it's going to be the greatest show. If he exceeds it, oh my goodness, it better top Sports Center and College Football Live. I'll say that certainly. But I completely agree with you. You saw the emotion from Caleb Williams at the end of that game, the tears covering his eyes, just how much of a competitor he is. And with all the hoopla that he's come to USC with, knowing he's only going to be here this year and next year, he wants to leave a legacy. He wants that number 13 hanging in the collie the way that number 3 is hanging for Carson Palmer, that Jordan Addison is borrowing for another few weeks, the way the number 11 is hanging with Matt Leinart. He wants to be that third quarterback to have his jersey retired, and he knows that in order to do that, you have to do historic things at USC, a la Heisman trophies, a la national titles, a la winning these big games. So I think he's going to come in with certainly a chip on his shoulder. I just worry that he balances that desire and that hunger with the poise that he's demonstrated time and again. Not try to do too much too quickly and too early in this game. Let the game come to him a little bit and then let him dominate. And I see this being a great Trojans victory, but it's going to be a hard-fought ball game against a very well-coached Jetfish team who, oh, by the way, was a former offensive coordinator at UCLA, very familiar with a lot of these USC players that he went into recruiting battles with across town. So there is that element of familiarity with this team, even though Lincoln Riley has exercised the transfer portal so greatly. So I think for all of those reasons, this is going to be a really compelling game and a sneaky good game nationally that maybe is being overlooked because of that point spread.
Yep. Yeah. And last thing I'll say is, there is still 1 year of the Pac-12. Next year, the Pac-12 is still around with USC and UCLA. And I would not be shocked to see Arizona as actually one of the top 4 to 5 teams in the conference next year, because I think that's what they're building down there in Tucson. So With that being said, both of us have SC winning. Should be a great game down in the desert. We can't wait to cover it for you. Kickoff 4 p.m. Make sure to keep it with the LA Football Network. For Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dowd. Enjoy the game. We'll have recaps for you next week.